All right. So the thing that I think most retail executives get wrong about their teams is really about their teams, right? And underestimating how powerful they can be. And when you give them the right tools, the right resources, the right development, and the right support, they will surprise you in all the most positive of ways. It's a great question, and you're spot on in saying that there's always a million things going on in the stores, and anything new just feels like one more thing that's getting added to the plate. Often I think the strategies that are getting developed in a meeting room or on PowerPoint decks or whatever, however it's coming together, they end up getting just overcomplicated, right? People start contributing their pieces to it. You've got cross-functional teams who want to work on these strategies and initiatives. And, a lot of times that initial vision and the initial impetus to create the new initiative gets watered down, gets bogged down, it gets complicated, right? So by the time it gets to the store, it feels more burdensome. It feels heavier because information's gotten lost. There's too much information. There's a lot of steps, and the stores don't always understand what the vision was. What inspired this, and why are we doing this, and why is it important? So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're building an initiative is what's the simplest we can keep this to ensure that we get the outcome that we're really looking for. Yeah, I mean, with each layer, if you're not careful, it can lose bits and pieces of it, right? I mean, on one side of it, you've got this initiative that's coming out to the field that has a very clear vision that has to get communicated in the cascade, and then, really, it's got to be so clear that they don't try to fill in the blanks for them. I think most field leaders, whether it's at the regional level, whether it's at the district level, and then even the store level, they really are trying to look out for the store teams and the people on the front line and not giving them just one more thing. But in doing so, sometimes that communication gets lost or the vision gets lost, and they're just trying to make it as easy as possible. That really all of the pieces that make that initiative what it was meant to be can get lost. So I think it can lose energy at every one of those levels. Done really well, it can gain energy at each one of those levels as well, right? But it really means taking the time to explain the why and kind of what's in it for everyone at each step. So, very clearly to regional leaders, hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to deliver it. Let's make sure this message lands. And same with the district managers. And then making sure that the store teams ultimately hear the real message and to get the real vision, not a watered down, not an overcomplicated, um, part of strategy that they just feel like I've got to get this done so I can check a box and move back on to something else. So, any of these things have that same opportunity to either lose its momentum or pick up momentum as you go. It all comes down to really making sure you've got the communication and the vision very clear all the way through. Yeah, it's easy to point to execution, and look, execution is usually where things break down. I think the important part of your question is okay, so why? Why does execution really break down? And what are those things that never make the slide? I think that probably depends on who you ask. But again, when things get overcomplicated and the stores really miss what the real message is, they lose what's being asked of them. So, if you're not crystal clear with what is it we're trying to achieve, why are we trying to achieve it, and what is the role that you play in that, if you don't kind of really uncover that as part of the postmortem and really create an environment where everything has to be covered, right? You've got to be able to have an environment where people can say what's actually happening because timing matters, how it was communicated, who was involved in this. I mean, if pieces just didn't work because it didn't make sense for the store, someone has to know that, otherwise it's going to happen again. And I think that's why a lot of times you see mistakes, even though you've done these postmortems, there's still quote execution breakdowns because we really never uncovered what the barrier was at the execution level. So for the stores. So it's never as simple as, well, it was just poor execution. There are very few store managers or team members that I've met over the course of my career who walk in the store every day who say, I just don't feel like executing today. They all want to do a great job. They want to do a great job for their team. They want to do a great job for their customers. They want to do a great job for the company. So when execution breaks down, while it's easy to point to the end of the line, chances are something broke down the road. And if you don't have an environment that talks about here's what really happened, then you're doomed to make those same mistakes again. So really, it takes a bit of courage at each one of those levels to say, here's what happened. Even if it's the unpopular thing, we didn't give enough payroll for it. We didn't give enough resources for it. There were already 15 other things going on, and we didn't understand the importance of this one. So all of those have to be really laid out as part of the upfront communication strategy to ensure execution will happen. One, they see the customers. So they see how customers are happening in their stores, what the traffic flow is. They also see their team, right? They see what's really happening every day, and no dashboard will ever show you that. And it's hard even for district managers, regional managers to see all that because they're in different places at different times. And certainly, people in the corporate office are not in the stores every day, even if they get out on a regular basis. They're not seeing all of those things. So, you know, I think if you were to ask store managers or anybody on the front line, they're going to be like, hey, they just don't see what we're dealing with every day. And then you can at least have a conversation about, okay, why are those things happening and what should be a priority and how can we manage through that? Everyone's going to have a little bit of a different opinion on that, but first and foremost, store teams, they know how their customers respond to things. They know how their team responds to things. And unless they have all of the pieces, all of the parts, all of the tools, all of the communication, they'll also see that, hey, this is missing these things. So all of those factor into, what does a store manager see in that 5 minutes that are like, oh, this is probably not going to work. And again, going back to our previous, question around, a post-mortem. Hey, the best way to start solving for a future problem is to ask questions and make your suggestions while they're happening. It doesn't do anyone any good to wait until the end and say, well, if we had just done, when you see it on, coming up, ask those questions, make those recommendations. And then, for all of those multi-unit leaders and the corporate leaders, make sure you're building an environment that listens to that, because that's really important. Especially when you're talking about retail and you're talking about the differences between stores, and you see, so same company, same initiative, same everything. It comes down to the store manager and their team, right? So how they lead their team, the people, the quality of people, the engagement that they have with the store manager, and then ultimately with the organization as a whole. But when you see differences between stores, it comes down to really the leadership of that particular store. And it's hard to overcome or overlook that, right? So I mean, both of them are really important. But if you see breakdowns, it probably is a people conversation first. And if you have a great team, by the way, if you're a district manager and you're looking at it, kind of thinking the same question, it's a great question to ask. Why are these two stores different? If it's not people, then it's something that you as a district manager probably need to understand in a much greater detail. If you think you have two great teams and that you think they're executing at a high level, but they're getting very different results, that's where you've really got to dig in at a different level and ask some different kinds of questions about, what could I learn from the data? What am I not thinking of? And really try to come from a fresh perspective to make sure that you're not overlooking something that might be staring you right in the face. So that's a good question when you're adopting, people who adopt something and people who don't. So much of that comes down to, I think, the communication. And again, this is where you really have to start anticipating, if I'm thinking of it from a corporate level, and let's say you've got hundreds of stores across your chain, you can't tailor a message to 700 different store managers. What you can ensure is that the communication is so clear and that the support mechanisms are in place that the district managers and the regional leaders are really empowered to be able to fill in the blanks that are appropriate to their individual leaders, right? So, if Chris learns one way and Bob leads another way and Sally leads another way over here, as a district manager, you've got to be able to make sure that you can coach to those different styles. It's still going to come down to the people, right? So if Chris doesn't adopt it, understanding why is really first and foremost in asking those questions. To get to what is why are you not seeing the bigger picture of this and you're just trying to go through the motions. And again, if teams feel overwhelmed to begin with and they don't understand the importance or the value of the initiative, the I just want to get through this mentality starts to take over, and that's where you see compliance outweighing really that commitment to the outcomes. But again, so much of that then comes down to having a district leadership team that can really help those store team leaders understand what needs to be done differently, right? Why, how should they be looking at it, and how then can they support them to get there? If they feel overwhelmed and they can't take on something new, then how do we help you through that so that you can lead through this new initiative in a positive results driven way? I think that the thing to fix about communication from corporate to the stores is it feels like every communication gets interpreted as directive, right? So that then can feel like a task. So then you start to say, well, I don't want to overwhelm the store, so we need to manage what we're communicating to the stores. And so what ends up happening is you under communicate. Right. So there's not enough because you're not structured in such a way. And this is a really difficult balance. I mean, having been in store operations and really managing store communications, it is a very, very difficult tightrope to walk to not make the store teams feel like every bit of information is a new task for them to accomplish versus information is just that information, right? To help you lead, to help you understand. But again, you've got to build that support mechanism all the way through so that your regional leaders, your district leaders, and your store team leaders all are hearing and understanding the same thing. So the thing I would say fix is make sure you're communicating enough. And if you think you're communicating enough or too much, you're probably still just scratching the surface. It's no different than like a change management curve. When you start getting tired of talking about it, it's probably when people are just starting to actually hear the message. So you've got to continue to find and look for new ways. I think the other thing is how do you keep it fresh, right? How do you ensure that you're touching on everybody's different learning styles? So it can't always just be a quote memo that comes from the office or a task that's assigned to the stores. How can you incorporate things like video, even audio listening, whether it's a podcast or something that people do inside the company. But you've really got to look for some different ways to engage the teams in new and different ways on the messaging, so that people will hear it.